It's been a volatile few years for the mortgage industry. Obviously, we've had COVID, we've had the kind of economic challenges that we've been going through over the last few years. What's the kind of current state of the mortgage market? I'm thinking here, obviously last year, AMI released the Viewpoint research, which if you've not read, I'd encourage you to have a look at. It's packed full of really interesting findings. Perhaps you could just begin by giving us a bit of a kind of overview and some of those findings from that research.
Okay, so yeah, let's start with Viewpoint, and then we can perhaps pick up onto where the market is at the moment. So thank you for the shout out on the Protection Viewpoint. We would totally agree. It's a fantastic insight into the protection market. What we did with Viewpoint in 2025 is it was our 6th year, so we did a little bit of a look back at some of the stats that we'd pulled before, some of the questions that we'd asked consumers before. So there's a little bit of a reflection back to the past, what was the current sort of situation in the protection market, and also some future trends. So there's some real sort of pieces, and too much for us even to pick up on, but I think there's a few bits. So the first part I'd call out is, just got some stats here to make sure I keep myself on track. So 99% of mortgage advisors state that they are asking clients about protection. So that's positive. So the mortgage advisor piece, only 1% of clients are asking them.
Right.
So there's something around a consumer awareness piece that we need to do more on. There's a split, 82% of mortgage advisors that we surveyed give advice themselves, about 13% then introduce the concept of referrals. I would say that actually consumers were quite comfortable with referrals. I suspect we'll talk about that a little bit later on, so there's some stats to prove that. I think one of the pieces to call out, and again, don't want to talk about opportunities, but it's worth calling out, it was a stat that really stood out for me. So even though advisors are having that conversation, or it's not resonating with customers. So only 39% of customers in the consumer research we did recall having a conversation around protection. So there's a mismatch between we're having the conversation, I'm not saying we're not having the conversation, we're having the conversation, but it's not landing, something's not resonating with customers to remember that protection conversation moving forward. A house purchase is a really high trigger for a protection conversation. So there's, again, some correlation there. And that also got called out in the FCA's, the recent interim report on the pure protection market study. They saw that again as, life triggers, life events, triggering protection conversations. And then we also saw some stats around consumers dropping out of the process. Right. So that was really interesting, that sort of current process, looking at where people get quotes and drop out. And again, I'll talk about that a little later on, but there were some key findings there. And then that last piece, you've just picked up on the economic piece. Actually, 78% of customers say actually the economic conditions really do worry them. It keeps them awake at night. And actually that really should drive a conversation around how do we protect your income, how do we protect your home.